Good morning, friends. Welcome to Ecoholics YouTube channel. Friends, my name is Avinash Agarwal, and in this video, I'll be discussing with you important current affairs for 27th May 2024. I have selected three important articles. First article talks about the situation of rural roads in India. So we have already covered a deep dive into the Manrega scheme, right? And in today's lecture, I'll be doing a deep dive into Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana scheme. So these are fairly important schemes. Like for instance, last week we also spoke about the Har Ghar Jal scheme, right? So whether it is Manrega or Har Ghar Jal or Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, these are fairly important government schemes, flagship schemes, which can have a serious positive impact upon developmental indicators in India. And there's a tendency in our examinations that they ask you questions based on these schemes. They ask you to do a current based evaluation, a real life, real time evaluation of these schemes, their successes and their failures, their hits and their misses, etc. So these kinds of articles, these kinds of discussions are very helpful in that context. Second article talks about fiscal federalism from the point of view of state capital expenditure and what the union government can do in supporting the states in making sure that their capital expenditure is high and in the right direction. So fiscal federalism is again always a technical and a slightly challenging topic for a lot of students, and we have been talking about it from a variety of different angles in this lecture series. So today's discussion will be more from the point of view of state capex. And the third article or the third discussion is on an even more technical topic, that of liquidity management by RBI. So I'm sure that you know that there are a lot of these tools that RBI possesses within liquidity adjustment framework, marginal standing facility, repo rate, reverse repo rate, right, standing deposit facility, weighted average call rate. So I'll be discussing a lot of those terms in the context of what RBI has been doing in terms of liquidity management in India, right? So these are my three articles today. I believe that they are in increasing order of difficulty. The first one will be fairly straightforward and easy to understand. Second one will challenge you a little bit. Third one will really challenge you, right? So make sure that you are there till the end and you are absorbing everything. Good morning, Rashmi. Good morning, Charulata. Thank you for joining in. Let us start. I hope I am audible and visible properly to everybody. All right. So whenever we speak about Bharatiya Janata Party governments, right? So roads and highways are like, some of their biggest achievements, whether it is the NDA government under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, or whether it was the earlier NDA government under the Prime Ministership of Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, right? So road construction has always been a high point for their governments, right? So the idea being that this Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana scheme, right? It was started in 2000, right? So that we could create all-weather roads for villages. Roads and rural economy, they are interlinked together in a very positive way. If you are able to push roads into rural areas, then you will also be able to improve education, improve healthcare, improve nutrition, improve availability of inputs, improve industrialization, improve the non-agricultural sector ka growth in those areas, right? So there's a very clear linkage between roads and rural development. So keep that basic context in mind. So it has been 25 years now almost since we have been operating this scheme. We have built 7,60,000 kilometers worth of road connecting 173,000 habitations at a bill of 3.2 trillion. So 1 trillion rupees being 100 lakh crores, right? So we have spent significant amount of money in this direction, right? 1 trillion rupees being 1 lakh crore, I'm sorry, right? So we have spent significant amount of money in this direction, right? Of course, there have been delays, there have been quality issues, monitoring may not be up to the mark, right? So a lot of things could have been improved, but yes, the achievements are quite significant, right? BJP government, when it came back to power in 2014, so the speed of construction picked up. I'm sure that you must have come across Nitin Gadkari's interviews at some points of time on your Instagram reels or whatever, where he has been claiming that the construction speed of highways, etc., has gone up. That's true. It's a fact, right? So 134 kilometers per day, right, was hit in 2017-18 so far as rural roads are concerned, right? 100 kilometers per day in the pandemic years, right? And about half of that in 23-24, right? And the spending on the scheme, right, it has undershot the budget estimates. So these are the problems that you should be able to highlight. These are facts. These are not anybody's opinions. This particular issue over here is it's a very big problem in India, that we decide that okay, we will spend X amount of money on Y scheme and end up spending quite less. So this is, it blocks the money unnecessarily in a particular direction, which we don't even end up utilizing. And B, what it does is that it kind of starves other schemes and starves other areas of funds, because you have blocked money in one direction and therefore are not pushing money in another direction. So in one direction you don't utilize it, and in another direction you go, starving for funds. So this is a problem of our budgetary management that we kind of need to take care of, right? So Swarna Lata, good morning, thank you for joining in, right? So barring 21-22 budget estimates since 16-17, they have been roughly 19,000 crores, which have been cut to 12,000 crore for the current year. Not very good at all. Not very good at all, right? अगर 12,000 करोड़ ही स्पेंड करना है तो 12,000 करोड़ ही मांगे, राइट? और अगर 19,000 करोड़ मांग रहे हैं तो 19,000 करोड़ स्पेंड करिए, राइट? दिस इज बेसिक दैट यू नीड टू कीप इन माइंड, right? So there is this report by the Standing Committee on Rural Development, and it expressed concerns over the unspent funds, and they noted that we need to have expeditious utilization of finances. We need to ensure faster completion of projects, right? And especially in states that are lagging behind. So very clearly, a rap on the knuckles, very clearly. And these are the kind of facts, these are the kinds of statements that should be a part of your answer going ahead in the examination as well. Construction of rural roads ka pace you can see over here, right? So as you can see that at least in the last 2-3 years there has been a secular decline over here, right? And spending under the scheme, right? So left hand side, the lighter part is the budgeted, the pink, the darker pink is the actual spending. So you can see that there is a gap over here, right? There is a big gap over here, there is a big gap over here, there is a big gap over here, there is a gap over here, there is a gap over here, right? So this is a 100% centrally sponsored scheme, right? We have different verticals. Some amount of money is also put in by the state governments. So it started off as 100% centrally sponsored scheme, right? Second phase was launched in 2013. Thereafter third phase was launched in 2019. The idea being that roads once constructed, they need to be maintained, right? Otherwise all the progress of phase 1 would be lost. So we want to make sure, we want to consolidate the gains and build upon them. That is why you are launching multiple versions, multiple variants of this particular scheme, right? Apart from that, these first and second phases, they are close to completion. They have achieved nearly 99% of the sanctioned roads under construction. And the third phase, it seems to be progressing well, right? It aims to complete 125,000 kilometers of roads by 2025 March, right? And already 70% of the roads have been constructed, which is a good thing, right? But parliamentary panel has again expressed concerns over delays for this particular third phase, right? In the completion of the first two phases, right? Despite the passage of substantial period of time since its launch, sanctioning of the entire targeted length of road to the states have not been completed, right? And again, the basic idea being that you will be missing the deadline. So what is the road ahead? What is the conclusion, right? We have been having patchy progress across various states. Northeastern states and hilly areas, they are seeing little progress, right? If you look at 8 states and union territories, they have made zero progress in the third vertical, right? And 5 have achieved less than 20% of the sanctioned length. Okay, so these are your problems. This is something that you need to look at. Slow progress, right? That is because of land acquisition issues, forest clearance issues, poor contracting capacities, right? And adverse climatic conditions, tough terrains, short working season in hill states. These are your major constraints that you need to get over. Being able to highlight this is very, very important. Always complaining that the government is not doing this, government is not doing that is not always helpful. You need to be able to identify the real reason why they are lagging behind and be able to offer some kind of solutions in that context, right? So this is where a lot of focus needs to be there, right? So sanctioning under the third phase, it has been slow, work has been pending, right? Quality is again a major issue. Parliamentary panel, the same parliamentary panel that we spoke about earlier, they noted that 41% of the roads, they were stated to be in poor or very poor category, right? And this has been India's problem since like 50-60 years now. Earlier we used to have something called as plan and non-plan expenditure. In plan expenditure we used to create assets which we should have maintained using funds from non-plan expenditure, but we were always interested in creating assets and cutting ribbons rather than maintaining old assets. You don't get any brownie points for saying in the media that I have spent money on maintaining assets. You get brownie points in the media for saying that I have created assets, I have built something new. That is typically where our problem lies, that we keep building but don't maintain as strongly as we should, and that is something that we need to be worried about, right? Apart from that, number of villages with a population above 500, right, it has already risen by nearly 27,000, right? So the idea being that you created a road to certain habitations keeping a certain population estimate in mind, but the population in those habitations is increasing. So is the road sufficient? Is it good enough for serving a higher populated habitation? So that is something that we need to kind of factor in, right? So we need to renew the policy, introduce a new vertical of the scheme, right? And we need to fully address the needs of growing population. Okay, so this is something that we need to be kind of thinking about. So you can see that first phase, second phase, they are 90% complete. Third phase is 70% complete, right? Not bad. Even from third phase point of view, not bad, but we need to pull up our socks. There is statewide variation in construction of rural roads, right? So you can see percentage of kilometers sanctioned so far under the third variant of the scheme, right? So you can clearly see that the pinky patches are the ones which are lagging behind. So at the entire northeast except of Assam, the entire Himalayan region over here in North India, your eastern states which are lagging behind on developmental indicators, your Bihars, Jharkhands and West Bengals, right? And surprisingly enough, even Kerala, right? So these are your areas that need to really kind of pick up progress. So this is my first discussion. I hope this was clear, right? Whatever points that I have highlighted, just pick up like 60-70 words, 70-80 key words from the discussion that we had, to make sure that if they ask you to write a note on Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana for 5 marks or 10 marks or something like that, then you have value added content. You don't need to study about this scheme more than what we have discussed in this article. I can assure you about that, right? So let's move ahead. Center will take steps to kind of help states make proper capital expenditure. So let's discuss how that is going to happen. If there is any doubt, you all can always ask in the comment section. Otherwise I'll be moving ahead, right? So interest free loans is what the central government will provide to the state government, right? And this is something that we did during the pandemic era as well, right? Even at that point of time, we gave a lot of interest free loans apparently, and we want to help states drive their capital expenditure, right? So the full year budget, the full financial year 24-25 ka budget is coming in July after the elections are over, right? And those who are aware of the developments that are happening internally, they say that significant amount of money is going to be allocated towards states for capital expenditure, right? So why is this happening and why are we talking about this? So as we have discussed in the previous week, RBI has transferred a record surplus to Government of India of 2 trillion rupees. Significant amount of money is therefore available with Government of India, right? And if they can transfer that money in the direction of states for capex, that is again a very good thing, right? So your interest free loan schemes for states could see therefore a higher allocation, right? To just give you some sense of recent history, so in financial year 2021, this special assistance to states for capital investment scheme was launched, and the key features of the scheme was that they were giving 50-year interest-free loans, so that states who are embattled by COVID-related issues could find their way out of those problems, right? So 50 years interest-free loans. This is a massive bump up for the states, right? If you look at the allocation to the scheme, so that was 12,000 crore, that became 1.3 trillion rupees in FY24, right? So significant amount of money has gone down this road, right? In FY24, budgeted allocation had 27,000 crore linked to specific reforms by states, right, which increased to 75,000 crores. Now let me explain this to you. See, a lot of state governments have a lot of loss-making entities, Like for example, a lot of state governments, they are having power distribution companies which are, let us say, running in losses, or a lot of state governments don't finance their local governments properly. They don't transfer money towards panchayati raj institutions and urban local bodies. A lot of state governments do not undertake the necessary reforms that they should take in a variety of areas. Those areas could be agriculture, power, those areas could be related to, let us say, collecting property taxes, those areas could be related to, let us say, healthcare, right? So there are a variety of areas where the central government wants to push reforms, and state governments don't necessarily align themselves with these ideas. Now, how do you kind of rectify this situation? So what you do is that you tell the state government that, look, I'm ready to give you money, I'm ready to give you so much loan, I'm ready to give you so much borrowing power, I'm ready to do this, do that for you, provided you do reforms. It's a carrot and stick approach, that if you do reforms, as you can see in this particular paragraph that I have highlighted, right, that we are linking the allocation in this scheme to reforms taken by states. So if you undertake reforms, checkbox 1 ticked, therefore you will get money. If you do the second reform, checkbox 2 ticked, you will get more money, right? Simple carrot and stick approach, as a result of which all the states and union territories, they march in the same direction, which is again a very good thing for the country, right? So you have to meet several conditions: reform in housing center, scrapping old government vehicles, ambulances, reform in urban planning and urban finance, right? Increasing housing stock for police personnel, setting up libraries with digital infrastructure at panchayat and ward levels. So you can see that these are variety of good things that the central government is incentivizing the states to do, right? About 75,000 crore or 58% of the allocation, it will be linked to outcomes and reforms, right? And remaining 55,000 crores, they will come with simple conditions, right? So you can see over here that this is a nice way of getting things done, as well as a nice way of sending money into the states, right? We are nudging the states to carry out certain reforms. States may not like this because they may, states always want more of untied funds. What are untied funds? Funds that are not attached to any terms or conditions, or for funds which are not attached to any end usage restriction. That is the meaning of untied funds, right? So states would always want untied funds. Central government would always want, to use its power to provide funds to states to get certain things done, which they may otherwise face difficulty in getting done, right? We are expecting a hike in this particular scheme's allocation, as I've already said, right? States, they account for 20 to 25% of the overall expenditure towards infrastructure, right? And these easy loans, they will be very helpful, right? So it's an ingenious scheme which has been funded to target investment across infrastructural developments, is what a lot of economists believe, right? Strict sanction norms, they make sure that there is efficient capital deployment, right? Additional RBI dividend will be helpful, right? And I guess that that's about it. This is the most important juice out of this article, which I've already given to you. So just keep this in mind, right? So you can see over here, central assistance to states for capital investment, right? The allocation has been going up, right? So we were at 1 trillion rupees, we have gone up to 1.3 trillion rupees, right? And going ahead in 24-25, we are likely to go above this 1.3 trillion, which has been earmarked. Okay, so this is the second article done. If there is any question, please ask. I have tried to explain adjacent concepts, related topics, concepts, variety of these things to you. If there is any doubt in that, you can always feel free to ask. Now this is a more challenging article that I will discuss with you, right? So there is this term over here called money market. What is money market? So let's say that you are a bank, right? And let's say that you have some surplus money, you don't know what to do with it. Then you can go into the money market and probably deposit that money with RBI, or lend that money to maybe some other bank or something like that, right? So if you deposit your money into RBI, you will earn interest, right? If you give that money away to, let us say, some other bank for some short period of time, you'll again earn interest, right? Or let's say that you're a bank and there is a deficiency of funds, you don't have enough money to take care of your withdrawals, etc. So you'll again go to the money market and you will borrow money, as simple as that, right? So by going into the money market, essentially what you're able to do is that you're able to take care of your surpluses, you're able to take care of your deficiencies. Both the things you are able to take care of, you're able to balance it out, right? And of course, there are tools that have been created which enable you to do such transactions, do such operations in the money market. And overall, RBI is basically developing this entire money market ecosystem and managing it on a day-to-day basis. So we are going to be talking about that in this particular article, right? Now there is something called as a call money rate, right? So call money rate basically, it's like, you know, when you go to a tomato market to buy tomato, you pay a price for the tomato, right? So you pay a price and somebody gets that price. So what that price should be is something which is, you know, very, very important, because if the price of tomato is too high, then you as a buyer will not go into the market. If the price of tomato is too low, then the sellers will not come to the market because they don't stand to earn anything, right? So the price needs to be appropriate so that you as a buyer you are not disincentivized to go to the market, right? And the price should be appropriate so that the seller has an incentive to come to the market, right? That's the importance of price. So similarly in the money market, same idea is associated with, you know, the call money rate, the rate at which, let us say, you are lending and borrowing your surplus resources, etc. So this call money rate should be appropriate. If it is too high, then that is a problem. If it is too low, then that's a problem. Same idea with the tomato market, right? And like I said, that this call money market is very important to take care of surpluses and deficits that banks may face, right? Now RBI has something called as the liquidity adjustment facility. As the name suggests, right, we are trying to manage liquidity. Liquidity is just a fancy word for money supply, right? We are trying to adjust the money supply, making sure that everybody has whatever they need, right? And there is no acute shortage of funds anywhere. Because if, let us say, any bank, let's say that I am a bank and I'm facing an acute shortage of fund, and therefore I am not able to, discharge my liabilities or, whatever. And I basically, default on my liabilities, so to speak. And that's a very bad outcome for the entire ecosystem. Why? Because if any bank defaults even on the smallest of their liabilities, then that can start a bank run on that bank, and then that can start creating question mark upon the stability and the resilience of the entire banking network. Okay, so liquidity adjustment therefore is very, very important to make sure that there is no acute shortage of funds in any sector, in any segment, in any bank, right? So through this liquidity adjustment facility, RBI makes sure that there is enough liquidity in the system, and therefore RBI tries to ensure that the weighted average call rate is in this range, right? So let's say that the repo rate is 6.5%. So we want the weighted average call money rate, right, to be in this band of 6.25%, which is the standing deposit facility rate, and 6.75%, which is the marginal standing facility rate, right? So that is what RBI tries to do. Make sure that the liquidity in the system is such that the weighted average call rate, what is weighted average call rate, right? That, see boss, there are literally hundreds and thousands of transactions happening in the call money market, right? So you pick up all the transaction ka data, see how much money was deposited at what rate, how much money was taken at what rate, etc, etc, etc. You do the math, right, and you will come out with one magical number, and that one magical number is your WACR, that is weighted average call rate, which tells you that when you kind of take the entire snapshot of all the transactions in the system, what is that one rate which basically represents all the rates or all the transactions that have taken place in the market. That is your weighted average call rate. I'm speaking in very simple layman terms because I am a layman and I want to explain to layman what is happening in India, right? So we want that weighted average call rate should be within a particular band. We have a liquidity adjustment facility related operations that we are undertaking, right? Now when you want to gauge the liquidity in the banking system, you will typically look at the net liquidity position of the banks. That let's say if I am a bank, at the end of the day, am I sitting on, let's say, a 5,000 rupees surplus, or is there a deficiency of 5,000 rupees? That is what my net liquidity position will tell me, right? So RBI should look at net liquidity position of banks, right? Now this net liquidity position, it is a result of both the flows and stocks of money. Flow and stocks, they are basically basic economic concepts you may have read in NCERT. If you have not, I'll explain it to you, right? So stock is something which you take a picture, you take a snapshot, and at the moment whatever you capture, that is a stock, right? So like for example, money supply, right? So that's a stock variable, in the sense that if I look at the situation now and I see what is the money supply in the Indian economy, it's a stock variable, right? On the other hand, let's say change in money supply. So change in money supply is something which gets defined over a period of time, right? That's a flow variable. So typically stock variable are variables which are, described at a point of time, and flow variables are variables which are described over a period of time, right? Like for example, in the last 1 year, my income was X. Today, my wealth is Y, right? So you can see that income, which is something that I have earned over a period of, let's say, last 1 year, is a flow variable because I'm defining it over a period of time. Whereas wealth, it's a stock variable because I'm telling you that my wealth today stands at this particular mark. Are you getting my point? Right? So similarly, when we talk about liquidity, when we talk about the money supply in the banking system, it gets impacted by both flow and by both stocks. So there is a stock of money within the banking system, and B, there is a flow of money in and out of the banking system over a period of time that impacts the net liquidity positions of the bank. I hope that this is clear. If there is any doubt, please ask. Right? Now there are two types of auctions that are happening. Right? There is a variable rate repo option, right, through which RBI lends money to banks. So if you are a bank, I am RBI, you can borrow money from me. So there will be an auction. Come to that auction, right? Everybody is, giving a boli. Even you give a boli, even you give a rate that you are willing to offer to me to get money through me via that auction. And that is what is happening. That auction, variable rate repo auctions are happening. Similarly, there is a variable rate reverse repo auction that is happening. But let's say I'm RBI, your bank, you have surplus money, you don't know what to do with it. You want to deposit that money with me. What is the rate that you want, right? So let's say that you want 6.4%. And let's say that somebody comes and says that they want only 6.35%. So I'll first accept their money because they're asking for less. I'll accept your money later, right? So there's only limited amount of money that I'm going to accept through, let us say, the variable variable rate reverse repo, right? And how much will that money be? Right, and what will that rate be? That will determine through auction. Like for example, through variable rate repo, I'm giving money, but I'm going to give only so much amount of money through the variable rate repo operation, right? So there is an auction. You want money, come and ask for money, offer me a repo rate. If you give me a lower rate, somebody else gives me a higher rate. First, I'll give money to that person. So that's basically how typically an auction works. I'm sure you are aware of that, right? So RBI provides liquidity to the system through the repo operation. It absorbs liquidity through the reverse repo operation, right? So as you can see that variable repo rate auction, the rate is in this range. So if the repo rate is 6.5% and the MSF rate is 6.75%, so then the variable repo rate operation operates in this band of, let's say, 6.51% to 6.74%. I'm sure that you may have heard of this term called, it's called rate corridor or something like that. So this is the repo rate, right? Let me call this RR, right? The upper band of this market is held by MSF rate, right? Which is, let's say, 0.25 basis point more than the repo rate. And the lower band is your standing deposit facility rate, right? Which is again 0.25% lower than the repo rate. So if repo rate is 6.5%, so RBI is willing to lend money, let us say, to banks at 6.5%, some amount of money, right? But if banks need more amount of money than what is available in the repo rate, then they need to approach the MSF window. That is the marginal standing facility window. That is the upper corridor, upper band of the rate corridor, right? Similarly, let's say that you are an institution, you want to keep money with RBI, then you can do that at, let us say, this lower end of the rate corridor, that is the reverse repo rate, right? So your VRR, that is your repo rate operations, operate in this corridor, right? That means 6.51 to 6.74%, and your variable reverse repo operations, they operate in this corridor, 6.26% to, let us say, 6.49%, right, or 6.5%. So these are the terminologies that you need to be familiar with. I have made an attempt to explain it to you. If there is any doubt, please reach out to us, please ask, right? So you see that there are two things which are simultaneously getting observed over here. First is that there is, on a net deficit basis, right, there is a net deficit of 1 to 1.5 trillion rupees on a daily basis in the system. But at the same time, you see that there is a surplus amount of money that is coming into standing deposit facility. So you see that there is net deficit at an overall level, but funds are still coming into standing deposit facility. That means that certain banks, they are having surplus fund 60 to 80,000 crore together, and they are putting it into SDF. But on a net basis, there is a deficit. But that is exactly what it should be like, right? If there are, let's say, 100 banks, not all of them should be in surplus at the same time. Not all of them should be in deficit at the same time, right? Typically, some banks will be in surplus, some banks will be in deficit. Those who are in surplus will put the money into the system. Those who are in deficit will take the money out of the system, right? That's exactly how it's supposed to be, and that's how it is that's how it's operating right now, right? So you can see that some banks have surpluses, right? They invest, some have shortfalls, and they borrow, right? Now, why is it that if you look at the, let us say, the FD rates or fixed deposit rates of certain banks, why is it that certain banks offer you a higher rate of interest for certain maturity FDs is something that gets discussed in this part of the article. So the author says that, see, I am a bank. Let's say that I have certain maturities coming up. I have to repay some amount of money going ahead, right? Let's say three years down the line, I know that I have to, let's say, repay 50,000 crores somehow, right? So what I'll do today is that I'll start mopping up money for 3 years ahead, and I'll start offering good rate of interest for that 3 year period, right? Why? Because I know that there is a spike in repayment that is coming for me going ahead. So I need to start borrowing money, need to make sure that money is available, and I'll start borrowing, I'll start absorbing FDs or whatever deposits, so that I can take care of that liability that is going to mature in 3 years, right? So that's what is discussed in this part of the article. So a lot of banks make a lot of micro moves for a lot of internal reasons, right? So it may not be related to any systemic change, or it may not be related to repo rate, it may not be related to the overall banking network. It's just me trying to manage my liabilities by manage my assets and my liabilities, kind of, right? There are three important developments that impact liquidity in the banking system, in the financial system. First is tax payments, right? So when tax payments come due, a lot of taxpayers put money into government's bank accounts, right? And government kind of hoards that money for a longish period of time, right? So a lot of liquidity goes away from the system when tax payments are done, right? Because government has a tendency to collect money and sit on it for some time, because fiscal deficit, they want to contain it, they want to make sure that they have money when they actually need it, etc., etc. So when your tax payments are done, a lot of liquidity exits the system, kind of, right? Secondly, when salaries get paid, so a lot of money it enters into the bank accounts of people like you and me, and then we spend that money, etc., etc. So a lot of money multiplier kind of phenomenon is getting observed in this particular time period when salaries get credited into our account, right? And the third aspect that affects liquidity in the system is the government cash balance, right? So like I said, that government collects money and then spends it. When it spends it, so money re-enters the banking system. But when it collects it and sits upon it, right, that time it is not available, right? Another very important aspect that affects liquidity in the banking system is the growth of deposit and credit, right? So let's say that you're a household and you have a penchant for mutual fund investments. So the moment, let's say, your salary hits your account, that is the moment you take the money out of your account and you put it into mutual funds, right? So obviously it depends, right? All of these things depends upon your preferences, your tendencies, right? Like I explained to you already about the fiscal deficit part, right? That the government has a tendency to hoard money and then they spend money in bursts, right? So suddenly there are quarterly targets that this particular ministry running this particular scheme should have spent, let us say, 1,000 crores in this quarter, right? Now suddenly the quarter is ending in June. Oh my God, let us start spending money, right? So the quarter was from April, May, June. We suddenly wake up in the month of June and start spending money, right? Let us say that for the entire financial year, some allocation was made. Suddenly we wake up in the month of February and March and start spending money, right? So the way government operates its budgets, the way government ministries operate, etc., etc., it has a huge bearing upon the liquidity situation in the banking system. Government adhering to fiscal responsibility and budgetary management guidelines is also very important. Government should keep its borrowing, etc., within constraints, etc., is what FRBM does. So we want to make sure that government is on the right track, right? Be that as it may, the conclusion is that RBI has maintained the liquidity situation quite adroitly, right? And this is some recent developments regarding the buyback of government securities. You can kind of ignore it if you want. It's not so important. That's fine, right? The important conclusion again is that RBI has done reasonably well in terms of managing all these surpluses and deficits. There isn't any systemic complaint that is there that okay, this is really bad or really pathetic, etc., etc., right? So things are by and large pretty sorted over here, right? So that's the broad idea I wanted to discuss with you. I hope this kind of made sense for a lot of people who are present in the session, right? If there is any doubt, you all can always ask. Otherwise, I'll bring this session to an end, guys. So it was really nice interacting again with you guys. Rashmi, Charulata, Swarnalata, as well as everybody else who participated. Thank you so much for being here. I'll meet you tomorrow again. I'll bring 3 new articles and I'll discuss the same with you. I'll share this note. This note will be uploaded on the Ecoholics app. You can download it from there after a quick free registration if you have not already done it. So thank you so much. Take care. Bye bye and see you.